Hello everybody and welcome back. In this lecture we're going to have a look at materials. Now we won't do a super deep dive at the moment. We're mainly focused on adding some colour to our models because when they're grey they're a bit boring and obviously not representative of the actual model that we really want to see. So materials, what is a material first of all? Well, a material is a description of how light interacts with a surface. You've probably heard of textures as well, and textures are something you can use to control the color or the bumpiness or perhaps the reflectivity of a surface. But we can also just use a slider and set these things to a solid value. Now, we've already played with the viewport shading a couple of times when we're talking about mishaps when you're moving things around, but this time let us be a little more deliberate with it. So at the top right of the 3D viewport, we've got these four spheres. We've got wireframe mode, solid shade mode, which does have other options of how things can look and the colors. We'll explore those again later. And we've got a viewport shading material preview. So this is a preview of the material itself. But then we've got this rendered mode, and this rendered mode is a bit special because it's not only previewing the materials, as we can see here, they're grey, but also it incorporates light into the scene as well. And that's why this building here looks like it's got a light in it. It does, it has the lamp inside it. Now, if the lamp is difficult to select, remember from very early in the course, we've said you can hold down Alt and click, and it will bring up a menu based upon what is underneath your cursor. So that's another way of selecting it in case you were struggling. So we're not going to deal with lighting in this lecture. We'll do that in the next one because that's important when setting up a scene. But material preview is the one we're going to want to look at. Okay, let's make our properties panel a little larger here so we can play with the Mayan pyramid that we've got here. Now, the Mayan pyramid itself was made of loads and loads of objects, and we've solidified it as one object. So when we go ahead to our materials tab, which is at the very bottom, our materials properties, it's this checkered sphere. We click on that, we see that there isn't a material currently applied to it. Well, it does have the default material on it, it's just not showing it at the moment. If we go ahead and press new, we can create a new material. It's called material. Now, if we go ahead, we can call this stone, or we could call it Mayan. It's entirely up to you how you decide to name your materials. If it's a generic material, you might want to give it a more generic name. If it's a very specific material that will only work on certain models, then again, naming the material along the lines of the actual model's name itself might be a better idea. There's no right or wrong when it comes to that. Now, an object like the Mayan pyramid here can have multiple materials on it, and we'll deal with that later. Okay, looking at this here, we've got a stone material. It's called stone. Let's scroll down. Now, there is a lot to take in here, and we're not going to have a look at all of this right now. We are going to have a look at the base color. We're going to discuss metallic, and we're also going to play with the roughness value. Those are the only three that at the moment we're going to have a look at. So first of all, base color. As you probably guessed, it's going to change the color of our Mayan pyramid. Now that is pretty awesome. So we can just click and drag on this color wheel to set a particular color. I'm going to set it back to white. If you wanted to change the value, i.e. how light or dark something is, you can go ahead and use the slider to the left. So this is a hue and saturation wheel, and this is the value. H, S, and V. Hue, saturation, and value. We've got other ways of denoting color as well. We've got RGB, and then we've also got the hex value if you wanted to use that. Now, I'm going to leave it on HSV for the moment. And the A, by the way, is for alpha. It's how transparent, or in this case, opaque something is. So 100% opaque, you can't see through it. If we drag that down, we've not got Eevee set up to do it, but that would make it completely transparent and we can't see it. Again, we'll play with more of this later on. Now, I've set this back to white because I want to play with metallic. Now, generally, materials are either metallic or not. So in general, you will have this, if you're going for something realistic and not stylistic, then you would either have this set to 0 or 1 as a rough rule of thumb. Now you can see there, even though the color is set to a pure white, Well, this doesn't look white anymore, and that's because it's being metallic in its nature. So it does genuinely change the physical properties of a surface on our object. I'm going to leave it as metallic at the moment because I want to play with roughness. Now, the rougher something is, the less light comes straight back to wherever you're viewing it from. And the less rough it is, the more shiny it is, the more polished the surface, until we go all the way down to 0, which will mean it's got a mirror-like surface. Now, if this was made of stone, that would not be appropriate at all. You can get polished stones, but in this case, we'd want it to be quite rough. We would not want it to be metallic, and we would want a base color that is lower down. So let's go for a darker grey like so. So there we go. We've colored this in, but we have a little bit of an issue here. How do we go ahead and colour in Suzanne the monkey at the top here? Now, there are several ways of approaching this, and you may actually have a different result if you did not join your mesh objects together into one big object. You may at the moment only have one object changing colour. And in this case, what we can do to solve both of these problems is you could join the object together and just change it as a whole. That would be absolutely fine. If you wanted to change individual parts though, what we can do is go into edit mode by pressing the tab key. And we're going to make sure we've got everything selected by pressing the A key. And then I'm going to press the P key to separate everything out by loose parts. Because we've not joined anything together, this will separate everything out into separate objects. Now I can come out of edit mode, back into object mode, and select Suzanne at the top. And notice she has the stone material on her. Now what we can do at this point in time is give Suzanne a different material. If we go and change stone, let's go and change it. Let's change the base color and make it slightly lighter. You can still see it's changing everything that has that material because it's changing the material itself. And we can see next to the name here, we have 129 users of that material. So there's 129 objects that are using the stone material. So I can just press the minus, that will remove that material slot. And then I can add a new material slot and call it, in this case, I'm going to call it statue. And this time I'm going to give it a slightly yellow color. And I'm going to crank up the metallic. And look at that. We've got ourselves a metallic Suzanne at the top of these steps. The eyes are separate objects. Now you may think that you can select both of them at once and then go and press the minus key and add a new material. But notice only one of them has changed. You only ever accessing and changing the active selected objects materials. So now if I go ahead and press new, I can create maybe a jewel-like color. Let's go for red eyes. Let's make them non-metallic, but have no roughness, so they're nice and shiny. Well, maybe I do want metallic. Yeah, that looks better. So how do I go ahead and add that to the other eyeball? Well, there are a couple of ways. I could go and select that eyeball, scroll up, remove stone, and instead of going for a new material, I can go ahead and select it from this drop down. And I just left it called material. So let's go and rename that gem instead. So when I look at this drop down, I can change it to gold. I can change it back to the gem. Now I will set it back to stone for a moment because there is another way which is especially useful if you've got multiple things selected. So if you go ahead and select the objects that you want to inherit a material, and then press shift and select the one you want to inherit the material from, and go to object and make links, or control and L, and select materials. This will copy the materials that are applied to the active object, the one in the light orange, across to anything else that is selected. And there we go. So a couple of ways of manipulating materials. We'll be playing lots with this as well. So in this particular case, I've separated out all of these stairs. So let's go through that process again. I want to basically color these stairs in. And I don't think there's a particularly quick way of managing to select all of those stairs, so I will just go through really quickly and hopefully just be able to select them as we go down. And typically, you would assign materials as you're building rather than trying to fix it later on. However, it's not uncommon to have to change multiple objects and their materials. So in this case, we've gone ahead and I think I've got them all selected. It doesn't matter if we don't, but I can select a new material or set a new material down here. I'm going to add a material. I'm going to remove the stone slot. So now we've got a new material down here. I'm not going to do anything, not going to make the material for the moment, but I'm going to go Control and L and materials. And yes, I did select them all. Perfect. I think I've also selected some objects inside, but for the moment we can't see it, so I will leave that as it is. Now I can come in. I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to name it, let's call it steps to be explicit with where they're going, and I'm going to make that a darker color. Now look at that. Because it's a different material from before, the others have not inherited it. So once again, I can go Control and L and materials. And you can go, you know what, I'm happy that these stairs can be all one object. So, because that's the active object, when I go Control and J to join all of these objects together, nothing happens. And you might be in a panic mode. I thought it was all going to inherit the same color. Well, if we have a look over at the materials, there's that default material. You know, I said we didn't make anything. Well, it is still there as a default material. So I can remove that and then everything will change to the material that's in the first material slot. Excellent. So that was a bit of a deep dive into materials. And I'd like you now to colour in the rest of your objects, because then they're going to look pretty sweet. We'll set up some lighting in the next lecture, and then we'll start talking about rendering them out so there'll be final images that you can share. So go ahead, pause the video now, and colour in the rest of your objects. Hello everybody and welcome back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hide these other two objects for the moment, and I'll do the workshop in a moment. I think that's going to be far more interesting than this castle here. So I'm going to give it all a base colour to begin with, and with the castle selected, I'm going to give it a default material, and I'm going to use one that I've already made, the stone. Now I have to be aware that that's going to affect everything that uses that stone. But now I can start thinking about the rest of the object. And just like the pyramid, the Mayan pyramid, I want to use this. I want to separate out everything because I did join it all together. So let's go ahead, go into edit mode briefly, make sure that everything is selected, press the P key to separate, and then do by loose parts. And there we go. This is the construction components that made it up in the first place. Let's press tab again to go into object mode. I'm going to select this top cone. I'm going to remove the material slot. I'm going to add a new material, and I'm going to call it roof for the moment, or more precisely a red roof. I'm going to change the base color to a red and darken it up just a little. Maybe make it more along the orange side. That looks brilliant. The portcullis at the front, let's zoom in so we can focus on it. Go ahead and select all of these components. And that was pretty good. I didn't manage to select anything else. I'm going to join them together whilst I'm thinking about it, because then I can just assign one new material, and I'm going to call it black underscore metal. Now, that's my naming convention. Quite happy to have black metal like that. Perhaps you want it without spaces. It's entirely up to you and your workflow. I like putting an underscore in where possible. Base color is going to be a dark color. I'm not going to go fully black. If you go fully black, it can not look right because it means that no light is being reflected. I'm going to make these, I'm going to make them metallic and slightly rough. So not very rough, but very reflective. And there we go. That's all I want to do on this particular object, basically because there's not much else I can sort of colour in without starting to add a lot of detail. But what I will do is this front cube here, I'm going to go ahead and delete it so it looks like there's an actual walkway going in. Okay, final one then. Alt and H to bring everything back. let's go ahead and select just this workshop here. There's lots to play with here, so we can practice some of the other linking of materials across. First of all, let's hide everything but that, so Shift and H, and let's focus on it with the period key by the number pad, or if you don't have access to that, you can go to View and Frame Selected. Okay. Now I have to decide on sort of like the colors that are going on here. I don't want to go too involved either. So I think I'm going to have a light wood, a dark wood, and a roof color, and maybe a floor color as well. So first of all, let's go for these pillars themselves. And I'm going to go New and call this dark_wood. And then the base color, brown, is sometimes a bit difficult to make an ideal version of it, so you can end up playing around quite a bit. So I'll rough it out like that, and wood is very rough. It's not going to reflect much, so I'm going to turn the roughness all the way up. The lighter wood, and again I'm just going to select one object to begin with, it's going to be more of a yellow wood, so I'm going to call this light wood. Go down to the base color, change it to a more yellowy color, a lighter color, but also make it a little bit darker than it was previously. Maybe move this around slightly. Yes, that looks about right. And again, these things can continue to be adjusted and tweaked until you're blue in the face with it. Now, there are a couple of options here of how I'm going to color in the rest of this model. I'm going to be a bit cheeky here and draw a selection box around everything and accept the tiles on the roof by the looks of it, and then I'm going to go ahead and link it to this selected object. So Control and L, materials. That looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and select these individual ones that I want to change the material on. So I'm going to start with these 4 corner posts and remove light wood and add in dark wood. Be aware that anything with a 0 against it means that it has no users, and it means that if you save your blend file and close it, that will be gone. It will be purged from your blend file the next time you start it up. Okay, that looks pretty good there. I'm going to whiz round to the side and go Control L, link materials. And now I'm going to select everything at the top. And what should we do here? Yes, I am just going to go and select one of these and link everything. So that looks good so far. However, I don't want the roof to be this color. And because I had some organization going on, all being well, under the roof, I can right click in that collection and select objects. And there you go. Those are all the shingles or the roof tiles selected. This is why it's really important to manage your objects in collections and keep them together so that you're able to do things like this very quickly. Now, we don't want this dark wood. I'm going to close it down. In fact, I'm going to use the red roof that we've already made. Now, I don't know what I've just coloured in. Yeah, I've not coloured in the right thing. I'll go back and fix that in a moment. I'm going to go Control and L, materials, select that one in the corner and change that back to dark wood. Okay, brilliant. So that is all coloured in. Now, the floor itself has inherited the light wood. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that from light wood to stone, and there we go. I think that's all coloured in and finished. Nice. Oh, we've got other objects, the previous test ones or the example ones that you could go ahead and make. Okay, brilliant. How did you guys get on? If you've coloured in your objects, go ahead, take a screenshot and share them, and you'll be amazed at when we start adding lighting to the scene, how that can change the look and feel of your models quite dramatically. And I will see you all in the next lecture.